People smugglers are generally unscrupulous. They've got no regard for the people that they are moving in and out of the UK. As far as they're concerned, they're just another commodity. It's highly dangerous, whether it be boats, lorries or cars. The way that they conceal the people within them, those vehicles aren't constructed or adapted to carry people in that manner, and it's high risks to life. The threat it poses to the individuals that are being moved are a high risk to their lives, and also the threat it poses to the UK borders. You're paying a driver maybe £2,000 or £3,000 for bringing in 5 to 10 migrants, and then you're charging those migrants anything up to £20,000. So the overheads are very low, but the profits are massive.
Taking on the people smugglers is the National Crime Agency. In August 2020, Senior Investigating Officer Chris Hill and his team got a tip-off about a gang doing something very unusual.
Operation Simbury was an investigation conducted against an organised crime group that was smuggling people both in and out of the United Kingdom. To hear that people were being smuggled out of the UK was absolutely astonishing and massively unusual. I think it was almost unheard of.
They suspected some of those being smuggled out of Britain were wanted criminals trying to evade arrest.
This organised crime group, they had a business model similar to what you'd expect in the haulage industry, where you don't run them empty. They had migrants coming in, and then the same lorry drivers on the next return leg would take people out. The investigative focus in the initial stages was around minicab drivers that we believed were taking migrants from the London area to meet with lorries.
A sophisticated surveillance operation was deployed to track the taxi drivers.
On occasions, there were a number of minicabs that came from various parts of London with migrants in, and they would all rendezvous with the lorry, and the loading was done in the early hours, generally between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, before the lorry then made its way down towards Dover.
2 males, 3.
In West London, NCA surveillance officers filmed migrants being loaded onto lorries.
We let them move in that lorry for a very, very limited time until we could put a controlled stop in with marked police units. When we stopped a lorry with migrants in the back, effectively that becomes the crime scene for us. So there's a whole load of pieces of evidence that we'd want to capture from that. We've got the lorry driver's phone. We've got the lorry driver's tachograph. Some of the migrants had mobile phones on them. All those things were captured, and obviously the migrants can be treated as witnesses as well, and significant witnesses.
Chris and his team came across 126 migrants trying to leave the UK, 3 of whom were wanted by the police for serious crimes, including manslaughter and child abuse offences. 5 lorry drivers were arrested in connection with transporting the migrants out of the UK. Detectives then concentrated their efforts on identifying the gang bosses controlling this organised crime group.
We'd amassed over 5 million lines of communications data. You've got to be really targeted, because there's going to be a whole load of what we call collateral intrusion. So it's going to be domestic calls that you're not interested in at all. So you've got to be really focused.
Chris was still looking for Mr. Big.
So how did they all know to be there at that date and at that time? Who spoke to the lorry driver immediately before? Who sent them those postcodes?
Among the data, a pattern emerged, finally revealing a name.
We were able to identify Mohammed Mokhtar Hussain as being at the head of the organised crime group. He was saved in some of the migrant phones as Paris to London and London to Paris, and one particular lorry driver, as I recall, saved him as boss. Mohammed Hussain lived in a nice property that was beautifully furnished. He was a man who worked in a restaurant in Whitechapel, but he'd been able to amass a huge amount of money that wasn't generated, obviously, by that business and came directly from organised immigration crime.
Complex digital forensic analysis also identified Hussain's right-hand man. Noor Ullah.
Noor Ullah appeared to just supplement Mokhtar Hussein's plans by bringing additional migrants that he had contacts with to various locations. Mr. Hussein would have a number of migrants himself, and then to make a full load, he would then go to others that would bring migrants on. There came a point where I went and made representations to the Crown Prosecution Service that we were now ready to move forward and make those arrests.
During a series of raids in May 2021, Chris and his team arrested the ringleader, Mohammed Hussein, and his second-in-command, Noor Ullah.
We are arresting you today as you've been identified to facilitate illegal migration both in and out of the United Kingdom.
We used about 190 officers, some of them specialists, some of them digital forensic officers, some of them conventional crime scene examiners, and also we had with us some immigration enforcement officers, because during the course of the investigation we identified a premises in Whitechapel, which was a safe house that was used for the storage of migrants. When we went into that safe house, we found 11 migrants. Every room that was available was full of bunk beds.
Detectives found a stash of evidence linking Hussein to people smuggling.
Fortunately, a large number of the phones that we were able to attribute to Mr. Hussein prior to going through his front door were found. We found a ledger, did include some of the routes he was using, some of the phone numbers and names of the migrants that we'd encountered. And we also found evidence of a bank account and a false name to launder the money from his criminal conduct. We presented him with some overwhelming evidence, and despite that, he wouldn't admit his guilt. And when the telephone evidence was put to him, the best he could come up with was that he'd had some building works at his home address, and that it was those builders that had left their phones there.
Mohammed Hussein's criminal empire had come crashing down, and he was left with no choice but to plead guilty and is awaiting sentence.
The financial investigation is still ongoing, but there are substantial amounts of money in Bangladesh sitting in accounts, and he has substantial property portfolio as well. So I would estimate that his profits were well in excess of £500,000.
Ullah also pled guilty and is currently serving a sentence of 2 years and 5 months in prison. And 5 lorry drivers and a female accomplice were taken off the road and jailed for a total of more than 18 years.
Absolutely huge success for my team, and I look forward to working with them on the next job.